think it's arrogant for industrial design to think it's our sole responsibility to save the world through sustainability. I think that's a very narrow view. I think it takes collaboration of all the way to raw materials, supply chain, every different function.
Welcome to Why Design. I'm Chris White, and this podcast is about the people behind products shaping our world. Every week I sit down with design and engineering leaders who've turned ideas into real-world impact. We break down how they lead, how they learn from failure, and how they build teams that keep moving forward. Because great design isn't just about what looks good, it's about people, culture, and progress. If you care about building better products, leading stronger teams, or rediscovering the purpose behind your work, you're in the right place. Let's get into it. Tylan, welcome to the podcast. Great to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Not at all. Thanks for making the time. So, I'm going to do my best to introduce you for those of the listeners who aren't familiar with yourself. But you're Tylan Tschopp. You are the Executive Vice President of Industrial Design and Innovation over at Westinghouse, where you're leading the charge to rebuild the consumer product division from the ground up. Before that, though, you spent a big chunk of your career over at Stanley Black & Decker, where you worked your way up from design roles to leading global innovation and licensing teams. Today, we're going to dive into your journey, how you think about design leadership, what it takes to build fast and efficient product teams inside legacy brands. So, Tylan, I'm really looking forward to diving into this.
I'm looking forward to it as well.
Yeah, it's going to be great. So, let's start where we always start with the podcast, and that's the question: why design? What drew you into design in the first place?
So this goes back to high school, I would say, and I am very much a product of my parents. So my mom has a small graphic design firm in Cincinnati, Ohio, named 5 Visual, and my dad was an engineer previously at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and then he became an engineering leader at GE Aircraft Engine. So literally that hybrid between design and engineering. I debated between the two professions coming out of high school, looking at college, and I started in mechanical engineering. Actually spent quite a bit of time there, did a 9-month co-op at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base doing work on ceramic matrix composites, which is a mouthful. Decided that was not the path that I really wanted to be in, and learned more about industrial design along the way. Actually learned about Ohio State's program there too, so I was there and then transferred over, and I just love industrial design from the start. So as soon as I really got exposure to what it truly was, I was hooked. It's an easy one.
Amazing. And your career's been super interesting, hasn't it, over the years? But like I said, a big chunk of that since the mid 2000s, really working at Stanley Black & Decker. But talk us through those early kind of experiences within, ITW and Ingersoll Rand, and kind of some of the kind of key lessons you learned there that then led you into kind of, Stanley Black & Decker and more consumer goods, I suppose.
No, absolutely. So I started as an intern actually down in Jackson, Tennessee for Craig Steinfels, working with him and Dustin Lee, who ironically, he leads industrial design innovation for Worthington Industries now. But I credit him for having taught me how to draw. That's why I mentioned his name, because he was our TA in drawing class. But Amazing. Down there, I learned a lot from those guys, learned about just visual design language. DeWalt, who's always been a very strong visual design language, and I would argue a leader in that space. So I learned a lot there, then went and studied abroad at Schwäbisch Gmünd in Germany, came back, graduated, and did some consulting work, and eventually made my way to the consumer industrial design team at Stanley Black & Decker in Towson, Maryland. And I was just very, very fortunate for the group of people that I came in with. There was a lot of folks very similar age, experience, and because of the housing crisis and the economy at the time, we had an unusual amount of talent on a small team that I don't think would have all made it to the same place if that hadn't been the case. So I learned a lot from those guys, and many folks from CCS. So it's David Miller, Rob Schock are two that were extremely talented on that team that I learned from. And it was a great experience early in my career. We had different skill sets as a team. I think Actually, later in a presentation, that team was referred to as the Beatles, which is a pretty charming thing. I think that makes me Ringo on that one, by the way. But it was really phenomenal. Really high energy, bunch of transplants spent all their time inside and outside of work together, and kind of it. I would say kind of went to war together. We were in the studio until 9 o'clock at night, trying to crank out new lines of Porter Cable or Black and Decker, Bostitch, Stanley Max, all new visual design languages, all chasing new commercial opportunities at big box retail, and it was intense but quite fun. So it was a lot of work hard, play hard, I'll say.
Amazing. And you stayed at Stanley Black and Decker for a long time, didn't you? What was it that kept you there for all that time?
I think the people, for one. There's some just great human beings. I'm a big fan of the East Coast culture, very direct communication too, which I thrive in that type of environment. I had opportunities. So early on, I got to lead the Suzhou industrial design team and was responsible for upskilling them. And that was a great growth opportunity. There was just constant growth opportunity for me in that environment. And I was learning a lot about, other sections of the business. I'll say Stanley Black and Decker, I can attribute to my high business acumen because they're very open with company metrics, what's going on, what the goals of the organization are financially. And I learned a lot. It just was very much, eyes and ears open during that time. So a lot of growth for me during the time there. Also, as a designer, you really get manipulative control from beginning to production there. It's not like a consultancy or something where there's a point where you hand off a product and you hope that it comes out without, more than 10% dilution of the design intent. You really get to go argue over a quarter of a millimeter on a radius, on a gear case, all the way to going to China and talking to the injection mold supplier for the housing and making sure that it comes through correct. So, it was a great environment and always new brands and challenges during my career too. So it's been quite fun.
And how much of that, that time there, you obviously, looks like you moved you stepped up or kind of moved roles every a couple of 3 years whilst you were there. How much of that was, self-driven and you kind of going and asking for the next move, and how much of it was like, your boss or your boss's boss kind of pulling you along?
Probably 99% me going and asking. I am quite assertive. I think of things that I've done that maybe have even created waves by pursuing it. Not to say there weren't times when I was asked. Actually, later in my career, I was very much pulled into more things. In fact, my last role, I was kind of claimed into. I was on a meeting and they announced that I was going to lead the hand tools and storage part, and no one had spoken to me about it at all before. So definitely, I guess, a mix. But I think you're responsible for your own career. In fact, that was something that was preached to us there by Jeff Ansel when he ran the business. And another thing that stuck out in my mind that he said actually in a town hall meeting was take the role that nobody else wants, like the challenging one that's actually valuable to the business. And I definitely took that to heart and jumped on roles that the licensing role in particular was not viewed as an attractive one from the industrial design group. And I jumped into that challenge full force, and it paid dividends for me personally. So.
Awesome. So what was, in terms of that specific role then, what wasn't so kind of glamorous or appealing to your colleagues that you kind of saw or that, made it great for you?
So licensed products at the time, I don't know how familiar you are with the licensing business, but there's a very large part of that is character licensing. So Disney, Marvel, those guys where 90% of the product is the character. It's a piece of plastic shaped like that. Then you get into the brand licensing, and there's a lot of transactional brand licensing where it's, we want to sign a deal with you. We have this line of flashlights, and we want to put Black & Decker on the side. So from a design standpoint, it's not in your VDL. It's not really the most attractive. It's typically dated or, already advertised tooling, and they're just trying to put the brand on it and, make money to get retail placement by having a brand versus not. So a lot of the product at that time for Stanley and Black & Decker brands was exactly that, or it was from a divestiture of the business. So,
interesting.
Yeah,
So
product wise.
you'd have product companies pitching you, say, can we put Stanley on this kind of
Yes, we'll
this?
pay you
Okay.
a royalty percentage to use the brand. We want to put it on this product line.
Hmm.
So, there wasn't a lot of design. In fact, the way that it was handled before was more evaluating. Like, yeah, that one's
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, that one's not. And that's pretty traditional on the licensing side.
Yeah.
And for me, so John Cunningham was our president of the consumer business. Then he had gone back into business development and licensing, and he had basically posted a role and just said, "What would you do with this?" And I
Hmm.
built out a strategy of co-development of product with licensees, really to
Hmm.
protect brand equity and to develop product the same way we would core, but using a licensee's resources. And that worked really, really well. So
Oh.
it was very different. So what it was not very attractive. What it turned out to be became uh, sort of an internal consultancy for external license partners to develop product. And I can happily say from a financial side, I think it's my best story in my career. Is we took that business top line from 700 million to 4.3 billion in 8 years. Because if we
Wow.
hadn't done a strategy like that, we would have never licensed DeWalt in the categories that
Mm.
we did, and we would have never had the success with the Craftsman brand after acquiring it that we did. So, um, yeah, this is a great
So
team. Not just me, but that strategy is exactly what I ended up doing for 8 years, which was great.
I mean, if there's ever an advertisement for the place of design at the at the decision making table, then that's it, isn't it? So that's really interesting. So it sounded like you're onto a good thing there, and it was quite an exciting, quite a new thing as well, where you had a big opportunity ahead of you. What led to then joining Westinghouse? And perhaps we should, for the people listening that aren't familiar with Westinghouse, probably give a bit of an overview of that brand. They're
Yeah,
hundreds of years old, I believe.
yeah.
You know,
Uh, our 175th anniversary is coming this January. So it
yeah.
started in 1886. Goes back to George Westinghouse. His first invention was like an air brake system for rail trains. Um, Fast forward to, I don't know what year the World's Fair was. I'm a bad historian. I apologize for this. It's like 1918 or 1920 or something like that. At the World's Fair, Chicago World's Fair, uh, the current wars with Nikola Tesla. So AC current and Nikola Tesla's
Mm,
invention of AC current was displayed then, and that's when Westinghouse, funded all of his work and won the current war to go to AC current. Thankfully, otherwise we'd have transformers all over the country. Um, and since then, Westinghouse was really a large industrial conglomerate, similar to a GE at the time, where they were in energy. The first moon landing cameras were Westinghouse. There's a ton of radar in the nose cone of an airplane comes from
mm,
Westinghouse. There was just big pieces of legacy engineering and innovation under the Westinghouse brand that it's just very attractive to me. The
mm.
opportunity to rebuild something with that kind of legacy and history uh, just felt like a really fun opportunity for me to take on.
Yeah, because I know when I was um, looking into Westinghouse before we first were introduced, because I had in my head that it was like a nuclear company, but obviously there was parts of that. But then there was a strong kind of presence within the consumer goods space, the appliances space. But then that's kind of, correct me if I'm wrong, that was kind of mothballed some time ago, and now you're leading the charge to resurrect that.
Yeah, there was Westinghouse was everything inside the home in like the 50s and 60s. There's great old commercials with like the cast of I Love Lucy, trying to sell Westinghouse product back then. And they held that position up into the 70s and even like early 80s in many categories. But when it got into the 90s, they had to divest. The industrial bought CBS and divested really
Mm,
large pieces of the industrial. Like Northrop Grumman bought the defense side, which was a big piece. Nuclear was sold. Um, Large industrial motors for like battleships and Navy ships, things
mm,
like that, went to Tico Westinghouse. So Nuclear and Tico Westinghouse are still part of our organization today through licensing. Um, but many others, electrical controls, went to Eaton, I believe, and I think Siemens is who picked up healthcare. So there was just really big chunks that were sold
mm,
off, and There was a number of reasons for that. I think product development for nuclear, hadn't necessarily turned profitability, but was very expensive. And
Mm-hmm.
thankfully, it's why Westinghouse is in a leadership position in that space now because of those early investments. But yeah, that kind of diverted the attention of the organization in the 90s. So.
So, what would you say were some of the biggest kind of differences coming from a business like Stanley Black and Decker, where the user, the consumer, obviously it's tools predominantly, but where that's at the core versus something that's kind of means different things to different kind of industries and it's lost its way slightly in the consumer space. But where are the key differences there from your day-to-day experience?
Yeah. I would say there's a lot of parallels between Westinghouse and the Black & Decker brand. So in my last 4 years at Stanley Black & Decker, I led industrial design innovation for Black & Decker. We were in the middle of a resurgence for that brand. And it does span across a lot of very broad consumer categories. So that ties to Westinghouse quite a bit when you get into the small domestic appliance, medium, large appliance space, and those other consumer products. So there's a lot of parallels there. I would say where Westinghouse is different is the light industrial to industrial, side of the business is just, massive equity, still very, very competent government contracts. I mean, they won nuclear won 4 contracts with NASA last year to do nuclear power on the moon and on satellites. And just really, really cool stuff. We're not doing any design work for that, but we do close communication with those guys. And it's just fascinating work. So that's where it's different. There is no ceiling, I think, as far as where Westinghouse can play, which it has right and historical right to do so, which is really fun. But bridging that gap between the innovation that still is occurring very much so in those industrial spaces and with the consumer product space is an interesting challenge for us, but one that we're excited about.
Yeah, because you come back to like the why. It's difficult to define that, I guess, with a business that's got kind of many fingers in many pies there and doing a great job kind of across it. But how do you deal with that as a designer? Not having or do you feel like there is an identity right now for Westinghouse, what it is? If you're serious about growing in design or engineering, you should join the Why Design community on Discord. It's where product leaders share real lessons, job opportunities, and behind-the-scenes insights you won't find anywhere else. And if you want more stories and strategies from the world of product development, subscribe to the Why Design newsletter. Both links are in the show notes, so go check them out.
I think there's an identity to the legacy of the brand for sure. I mean, we had the logo being done by Paul Rand definitely speaks to designers everywhere. I think I've got a doodle of it behind my head over here. It's just, I think it's still very iconic and relevant, especially the short form of the logo. We have an identity with all the engineering accomplishments that have occurred under Westinghouse, and it's an opportunity, with our VDL, which I'm a big perception-driven visual design language person, celebrating that engineering. So looking more towards that full engineering and intentionally communicating that is a fun challenge, and similar to some things I've done in my past life as well. So that's quite fun. And the other thing I didn't mention with Westinghouse is really the team. Our CEO took the company private a number of years ago, and he's very passionate about the brand, the history. Just our corporate leadership team is very nimble, very decisive, and it's an exciting thing to be a part of. We can really, if we want to go after something, we go after it. We're not going to talk about it for 18 months and then maybe pull funding for it 2 months or 2 years into it or reduce it. We're going to go after it full force, which is really, that's a rewarding, exciting part.
That's awesome. Yeah, because one of the the main challenges from an individual level within big business is often the pace of decisions and how things just get kind of held up in bureaucracy, and you're so far removed from the decision makers to the actual coalface. So, and that's really cool. Well, let's talk about teams and your experience. You've built and led teams from scratch. You've also inherited existing ones. You've told me that mentorship and feedback are key to how you operate. So what do you, Tylan, what do you look for really in top talent, top design talent, if you can distill it into kind of 2 or 3 points?
Yeah. The first thing is identifying talent. Finding design talent is important, for young designers. Showcasing your skills and showing that you've committed to the craft to develop those skills is really important. I like to see growth. When you look through a portfolio, you want to see someone who, maybe their form development, their sketch rendering, or their thinking and process evolves as projects go through. It's more, I say, more a negative if it's all the same all the way through. You wonder, will they progress? I like to see that growth. Attitude is really, really important. This goes across any team. I think, you want someone who's hungry and willing to contribute and asks, what else can I do? Seeing that type of energy is important to me. Really inquisitive folks too. Another piece is having a design eye, even just looking at another designer's inspiration, what gets them excited, what's aesthetically pleasing to them, what they think good design looks like. That's another really important thing too, because you can see what they're aspiring towards. And admittedly, I've seen folks that have really high talent, but I would argue that the direction they're chasing is not one that I think would be advantageous, at least to work with me or my team. So let's see, what else? I like folks that are a little bit competitive too, honestly, a little bit of that competitive edge, not in an unhealthy way, but having sat on teams where people are, kind of competing with each other or trying to, make the best design proposal or start. It's refreshing, and it helps everyone grow. A little bit of that helps everyone grow. I like everybody to be just a tiny bit uncomfortable occasionally. It's fun.
Have you seen that backfire though, where
I have seen, I would say over time, not on my teams specifically, but I have seen where it becomes, a negative relationship because people are competing really, really hard, or a project gets switched from one designer to another, which is not something I ever like to do, honestly. But, sometimes it may be necessary, but it's a rare case. Yeah, it depends on the personalities you have. I think if you hire, really positive people, I think having that competition is good.
It's from a management point of view, you've got to stay on top of it, though, haven't you? Make sure it doesn't get out of hand, or that it's healthy rather than toxic. So, but yeah, so you want people to be driving for the best and pulling other people up with them. It's
I think some of that comes to, like, when I say competition too, it wouldn't be on the same project. It would be everyone has full ownership from cradle to cradle as a designer on my team. So it's your project, but if you want yours, every designer's like, if theirs is looking a little bit better, or it feels like a better design solution than the other, that's the kind of competition I mean specifically. So,
yeah. And if you had a choice, kind of say that there was a blank slate tomorrow, and you had the choice between building a team from scratch versus inheriting one, would there be is there a clear preference for yourself?
Yes, I'm building all day. I probably have a short list of about 30 people that I would build if depending on how big of a team we wanted. I would make phone calls, and I would argue, just because there's so much talent available right now too. And, we could build one hell of a design team really, really quickly because of the resources are there. I love building teams. It's a really fun thing for me. You find out, who meshes well with me and my style of being very direct and blunt and high energy. I've always told young designers that we're here to build rock stars only. So it's a level of effort, and we'll put the same effort into the designer in training and helping and mentorship. And from a productivity, from a business standpoint, I think we are. I guess I've had great success in that light. We can be very productive, teaching designers to know that sometimes it's a visual literacy question, but if you're aiming for 97% flawless execution, that's good. That last 3% might take just as much time as the first 97%. And that costs you a whole nother program that probably costs the business millions of dollars if it's a large business. And just understanding that value, that having that business acumen makes you a better designer. I think the broader you understand the overall constraints, the more powerful of a designer you become for a business.
Absolutely, yeah. Really interesting. So you're putting let's talk about a hypothetical scenario here. So you're putting together a team tomorrow, and you know, I'm guessing, yeah, you want rock stars, but reality is, you can't have a team of A players because some are slightly like A plus, some are A minus. There's always differences between them. So just wondering, what kind of traits, or do you assign kind of, certain kind of, not necessarily positions, but as part of the makeup of your team, do you have kind of identities of kind of, I need someone who's a leader, I need someone who's a doer. What kind of, what's
Yes.
the team made up of in an
No,
ideal world?
100% you do. And I would argue, I think you can have all A players, but they're all going to have different strengths. And it's going to be
Mm-hmm.
complementary strengths, similar to, I'd say, like a baseball team. A shortstop
Mm-hmm.
and an outfielder maybe have some similarities, but third base and a catcher, very different skill sets. And we need
Mm-hmm.
all of them. You need all of them to have a really competitive team. So, but as far as the makeup of mine, I look at it in twofold. And this is where I've bucked with HR historically in some of these spaces. I'm not one who's going to write up the ideal traits and skills for something and try to go find that person. In the design world, that tends to be a unicorn every time I do that, anyways.
Mm-hmm.
I more like to look at what talent is available and what type of team can we build with that available talent. I'll give an example. So two unicorns. I'll mention their names just because they are exactly that. John Burney and Leighton Merritt are both exceptional in 3D form development, ergonomics. They can build in CAD faster and more accurately to a design intent than anybody else I've ever interacted with, and they're just sponges for learning tools and how to do that. And I'm not saying they're not the same person either, but they both have those
Mm-hmm.
very rare similar traits that I would call a unicorn. But someone who can move that rapidly and understand the design
Mm-hmm.
intent, not diluting it, is a phenomenal asset to have on a development team. And those that are problem solvers too. I think 3D development can be tedious and not the most rewarding roles. Like we have a surfacing group at Stanley Black and Decker, and that team is where the rubber meets the road. So they get beat up quite a bit because the timeline, everything falls on them. Anyone else drops the ball, it all falls in their lap. So having some serious horsepower there is just extremely powerful thing to have on
Mm-hmm.
an asset for a design team. And someone who can move efficiently, is willing to make that investment to do things maybe a little bit harder, a little bit more tedious, but the result is that much more refined and better
Mm-hmm.
versus, when it's just done as an execution. Imagine someone who is a traditionally trained engineer trying to do Class A surfacing on let's say, a car or a drill or a highly ergonomic area. Um, they may not have the desire to do something that's going to take 4 more days to get this detailed, really pristine the way that a designer had intended. And you may go back and forth quite a bit. So those that are up for the challenge like that's one thing that I think is a very key asset. You need folks that can develop form. There's people who are phenomenal at it. It's not my greatest strength. I think I'm pretty good at it now, but I
Mm-hmm.
learned a lot from those around me. Many folks that went to CCS, and a friend of mine, Dustin Lee, just natural form developers. They can throw down 800 different shapes of the same item, let's say a radio, for example, and they can just do that inherently. They just have that skill set that refined, and it's amazing to see. It's really valuable when we're trying to develop new design language, especially if you want to try
Mm-hmm.
to protect it with some IP and being very conscious in how you do that. Those people are very valuable as well. Um, I always look for a right hand person too, and that's someone
Mm-hmm.
who can step in a room when I'm not there and lead. And that means talking to a CEO or talking to someone else and speaking um, from a place where you have a professional design opinion and there's a reason for it. This is not something that many designers I've seen in my career tend to take a more subservient role when they're talking to senior leadership, and more of a service-based role, which
Mm-hmm.
is important when you're a consultant, perhaps, but you still need to have your professional design opinion, not here's 10 options. which one do you like?
Hmm.
Here are 10 options, and here's why we believe this is the direction to go, because it's giving this perception to the end user and it's helping your brand equity here, or it's this uniquely isolated number of form elements that we feel we can protect and ring fence so no one can copy us. I'll use Dyson as an example. The top of their little intake manifold for the vacuums, that's extremely well protected through design patents. I've taken some of that strategy for VDLs. It's very powerful, but you need to be able to speak to it in the language that the business is going to understand. And so looking for that lieutenant or someone who can stand there and communicate at that level is really, really important too. So I've got Kate Morgan on my team here, who is exactly that. I had Tim Payne on my team at Stanley Black & Decker, who was exactly that as well. So that right-hand lieutenant is really, really important as well.
Absolutely, yeah. And you've mentioned on our previous conversations that you're very well connected. You made it kind of that's an intentional thing to spot talent and have it as a long-term kind of relationship building, networking, but also later down the line you might be able to call on them to form part of your team. But if you were to look at the open market, let's say, look at kind of new to you people, what things are people doing successfully to stand out and grab your attention, whether it be as a potential lieutenant or whether it be as a awesome surface modeler, or what kind of grabs your attention on, let's say, applications, not necessarily just portfolios, because usually it's you get the LinkedIn profile or a resume, CV first. Over to you.
I am a stereotypical industrial designer in the fact that I will look at the portfolio first and I will read absolutely none of it at first. We're just going to look at images. We're very visual people. And if you haven't refined the skills for that yet, then you haven't committed enough. So seeing potential is important. So it really depends. If you're looking at entry level, potential is key. Is someone making the effort? Are they growing through their portfolio? Can they sketch render? I know that may be viewed as an older skill by some younger folks that are using Viscom or some of the AI tools, but to date, I still have not found that you can manipulatively control and execute a design through that. They're a nice support, and there's ways to use those tools. But if you can't communicate by sketching, that's a huge disadvantage. So you have to be able to sketch. My least favorite thing, and I went through some portfolio reviews recently with a school. I won't mention who it was, but 3 or 4 of the students said, "Oh, me and sketching have a love-hate relationship," or "Oh, I hate sketching. I don't like to do it." And I was like, 1, not something you say in an interview, but 2, I appreciate your candor, but this is just not going to be a fit ever. I mean, if you're sitting in a room with either a senior leader or you're sitting there with manufacturing side, and you need to solve a problem, you need to be able to throw down and communicate a 3-dimensional concept by hand in a matter of minutes. That's just a requirement for me. So we couldn't solve problems or be a good designer without that skill.
And is it more important that it's that they just get something down, or has it got to be quality?
It just has to be able to communicate. It doesn't have to be blowing off the page, killer renders with the fisheye lens angle and all that. No, and over stylized. You just have to be able to communicate. A simple line drawing that communicates, hey, what if we pull this from this direction, or what if we do this shape? Does that get us the things we want? That type of communication is important. I mean, I think it's actually something that most engineers, some that are very successful, have the ability to do that as well. It's very helpful. Even those old, I think I took in high school, the 3D drafting with the drafting arm stuff before AutoCAD was out. But that ability to visualize it in 3D and communicate it in 2D is really powerful.
Yeah, huge. I mean, I speak to a lot of designers who have got fantastic renders in their portfolios and it's stunning visuals. I'm like, where's the sketching? And they're like, Chris, I'm not very good at sketching. So, but did you sketch, how did you get to that point? So, well, I just roughly drew out what I wanted it. And said, well, that goes in. It doesn't matter how rough it is. In my mind, I'd rather see something that's rough and ready, as long as, like you say, communicates the idea, because
100.
then it's even more impressive that you got to that point, rather than it just being the render. So
Yeah, and it's I'll do doodles like this, just a simple one for a display,
yeah,
but like simple line work drawing. Sometimes I'll get there, and once I think throughout your career you get better and better at seeing things in your head.
mm-hmm.
And once you've got it there, I might go from line work straight to 3D and bang something out really quickly just because I've got it really
yeah,
clearly in my head. I think that's perfectly fine from a design standpoint. The one thing that I see though when I see mostly CAD and renders and not much on the
mm-hmm.
sketching side is my business acumen brain is going, that's cost, because that's time. Because if you need to iterate in 3D, you're gonna need another 2-3 weeks to do a new concept. Whereas if you truly learn how to sketch, you can throw down the next one in an hour and a half, and it'll be in a Photoshop semi-realistic render. We can evaluate the concept and then make the investment of weeks to 3D. That's the crutch I see on the 3D bias over 2D. But yeah,
It's so more interactive as well, isn't it? You could be sat in a design review and very quickly go, so did you mean like that? Or, and sketch it out. And that's a lot more instant rather than, let me come back to you an hour once I've tweaked this curve and this surface.
Yeah, the collaboration when you can sketch is just so much higher frequency. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, yeah, something thankfully that the AI isn't going to take away from us too soon, at least.
Yeah,
So,
it will definitely make things more. It'll be really powerful tools for some designers, but we can talk about that at length, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, we'll try not to touch on AI in this one. We've done it to death on other episodes. So, but in terms of building your team out where you are at the moment, because you're there relatively early days, isn't it? Where at Westinghouse. But what might surprise someone if they joined your team today?
Oh, that's a good question. How much we do with such a small team, I think, would surprise someone. It's over 70 products now in the first 2 years. I know we were over 50 in year one, and that is full production surfacing, from sketch to the full production CAD model in CATIA, Class A surface, solids.
That might surprise people as well that you're using CATIA within consumer goods.
Yes, so this is I've got a pretty refined workflow that I developed through really with that consumer team of great talented people starting back in 2010. But I kind of took that method and put it on steroids and developed that through the licensing process there, and brought that with me here because just the stack of tools we're using allows us to develop really ergonomic, really refined, full production 3D with draft, everything in a very, very fast and short time frame. So,
yeah, awesome. And how big is your team in terms of design? It's tiny, isn't it?
Direct reports right now is 3 people.
3 people, 70 products in a year.
Yes. Now we've got some outside resources we've used for things, but really on the product development side, I can say even coming into this role, I was a lot more hands-on than I even anticipated coming in.
Yeah.
So I can openly tell you those first 50 came from yours truly. So it was a lot of rolling up the sleeves and getting into it, which is fun for those that love to do it. It's fun, and I think the design language, having just done the Stanley design language with the team at the Black & Decker and just done the Black & Decker one before, being in a place that has one brand and having that flexibility of, okay, I don't have to section it below the wall, and it's got to line up with Craftsman here, but can overlap there. None of that constraint. This was kind of ready to pour out of me a little bit. So it was
because some say that design needs constraint, but then I guess you're constrained to you've got to be sympathetic and sensitive to the brand and the legacy of that. But then, like you say, it hasn't got the defined brand language as something like Stanley.
Yeah, well, and Stanley was we were some of the products have launched, not all of them, but
Yeah.
actually I can point this one mostly for Europe, but this
Yeah.
is a British product. But Stanley has a legacy, and we were changing a
Mm.
big piece of that when we did that visual design language. That whole team was phenomenal, and they've
Mm.
just started doing some marketing campaigns in Europe where that brand is really really prevalent. Um,
Mm.
yeah,
Does
it
it make?
had legacy here. There's
Yeah.
legacy on the generator space, which
Mm.
we want to relate to very heavily. But then, the rest of the consumer products, there hasn't been as much in the last few decades. So it's
Yeah.
pretty open.
Yeah. Interesting. Do you find, being free of some of the constraints, does that in some ways make your job a bit harder? Because sometimes having the constraints, you've got to narrow your kind of creativity into that spot, and problem solving becomes a bit easier when you know where you work. I wanted to pause a moment to talk about Kodu, the specialist recruitment partner for physical product teams. When founders outgrow their early team and need engineers who can scale hardware, that's where we step in. When design consultancies win more projects than their teams can handle, we help them find senior designers who deliver without losing creative quality. And when established brands push into new hardware categories, we bring in leaders who've built category-defining products before. If you're hiring or planning your next move in product design or engineering, head over to teamkodu.com or connect with me, Chris White, on LinkedIn.
I would say no, but that's just because I've operated in them for so long.
Yeah.
I can say like openly for the Stanley video, I think we met 18 times with almost the same presentation and content, and just not quite the same decisive, as you would expect with a more hierarchical, multi-layered, matrix organization. And you're not in the room for all communication on it. So, anytime you're interpreting through the game of telephone, it's new challenges. Or trying to do things which I'll hats off to Stanley Black & Decker that are hard to manufacture, really challenging, but we take on those challenges almost like anti-counterfeit type of approach to currency. Like if you can figure out how we made this, it's another hurdle to copy or emulate. Here, we're not making those types of investments in the design language to make it really really challenging to replicate. We're not doing like really elaborate power copies in CATIA for a handle like a dual handle, things like that. So we're more mindful of the business, and manufacturing for speed here. There's different constraints, but yeah, it's kind of freeing not to have them, to be honest, because when you're trying to communicate something intentionally, you can just dive right at it. It's I guess what you're trying to communicate is the constraint more so than trying to stack within a portfolio of brands.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting because I was at a conference. Sorry, the organisers were at odds to say it's not a conference; it was a festival, but it was a medtech festival, and there was lots of workshops that went alongside. And I attended a branding workshop, which was really interesting because it's quite a big topic. But then we ran through an exercise at the beginning. We given a brand or a product, and then a medium to advertise or brand it on, and mine was I can't remember what it was, but it was basically a napkin. I had to advertise it on a napkin, and it really kind of forces you down a narrow path of kind of how do I get this message across on this napkin, and actually, and everyone had a different brand, a different thing to advertise. But the amount of creativity that forced, because you were like, well, I can only think about how I can use this thing to say that thing, yeah, quite interesting. That's hence why I thought that question really. But going back to the 70 products you've released in the last year, are some of those going to be on show at CES? Because you mentioned that you guys are prepping for that.
We'll have some products showing at CES. Some have launched on Amazon already. Many are admittedly it being tariff mitigated right now, so they're a little bit delayed on their launch, and some are seasonal. So you miss your launch window 1 year, it delays to a year. But yes, many of those will be there. Some are out on Amazon now already. So yeah.
Has Westinghouse have they exhibited at CES before, or is this new for
So
basically
the
what you're doing?
TV segment of the business
Yeah,
has historically had a booth there.
yeah.
This year will be in the main hall in a much larger booth right near Samsung. So it will be
Oh, awesome.
it'll be a good showing for us and
Mm,
giving good tribute to the brand that very much deserves it. I think there's just so much great legacy within the brand and the organization. So we'll be excited to celebrate it and yeah, it should be quite fun.
awesome. Well, I'll be sure to check it out when I head over there. Hopefully, this episode goes out before then as well. We've not just missed the opportunity, but I'm sure it will. But well, talk to us. You alluded to supply chain. Obviously, that's a big challenge right now for businesses. I imagine there's a lot of manufacturing goes on in like Asia, China. But what have been, without wanting to put words in your mouth, what have been some of the biggest kind of manufacturing or supply chain challenges that you've had to solve
Yeah.
recently?
I mean, tariffs is the obvious one. It's the giant elephant in the room.
Yeah.
It's when you hit 55% for China, and then I think we've replicated those numbers with India and even Brazil. Which were obvious outlets. I think Southeast Asia, Vietnam, Cambodia, those places are much more reasonable. So that's one outlet. I think Mexico is another, sort of primed opportunity, but still surprisingly hit with tariffs through this whole thing. So the obvious places where diversified supply chains existed were not always the obvious place to go. So I think you've seen more folks go to Thailand and other countries that have negotiated a more favorable deal on the tariff side. And the other side is, the true push for U.S. manufacturing, which I will openly admit is, a system that's built for high value, high technical, more challenging manufacturing products versus, very simple, easy to injection mold or manufacture or stamp or those types of products. It still makes more sense to be outside of the U.S. and so because of the cost and the whole business model there. But yeah, it's really just timing and resources. Now, if you had a diversified supply chain, you're competing with everyone else who is trying to diversify. And so the footprint in these smaller manufacturing footprint countries are being it's very competitive. So if you want to say you can get brushless motors in, I'll say Vietnam, every major player that wasn't there is there now. And so you're in a scenario where, the country doesn't have the infrastructure that China does, or even India or I'd say, they don't have that infrastructure. And so it's way more competitive to get components, raw materials, shipping, all of that all of a sudden becomes, you're just moving a massive supply chain, and you will not see the same cost advantages that you saw before. So it just takes time and strategy.
Well, yeah, you get obviously tariffs being a market factor, but you get the supply and demand market factor as well. If there's a limited number of alternative suppliers and they're all in high demand, the price goes up as well. So it's all impacting on your ability to deliver products and your customers' ability to buy kind of the awesome stuff you're producing. So has that impacted kind of how you design products? Has it made it kind of filtered into the either material selection or design process?
In some ways, yes. You're dealing with a slightly less sophisticated manufacturing capability. Sometimes, at least that's a possibility. So, for example, I'll just use this since it's right here. But for our leaf blower, this is a triple shot mold. So this is molded in the go, and it's all in one mold. There's less triple shot mold machines in other countries. I mean, it's not that common anyway. So finding access to those injection mold machines is a challenge. It takes some time. You have to make sure you have enough volume to get priority with the manufacturer, things like that.
Yeah. And does it therefore, force you to simplify products or design? Yeah, obviously designing with that in mind. So interesting. Yes, it's had a
Okay.
big knock on.
Operating within the almost in the engineer's dream constraints, the really
Mm.
easy, this
Yeah,
is just trying to lean towards something that's very easy to execute, doesn't have
yeah,
much of a manufacturing challenge. Do more of that as you have a volatile supply chain.
yeah. It's an interesting one because you can see arguments on either side, can't you? I mean, the key thing there is really though is the uncertainty and how things keep changing. And you can't, you plan for one day and then the next day things have changed. So, yeah, tricky times. But it, looking further down the line, and product longevity, let's kind of move more into the long term. You know, what does product longevity mean to you in kind of today's climate around kind of, you mentioned that you'd like to build stuff that lasts.
Yeah.
Challenging right now to do that, I suppose. But what does it mean to you?
So I find developing products that last in market for a long time and are successful is probably the most effective way to drive for sustainability within our
Mm,
profession. I could go on this topic quite a bit because there's beliefs, and I'll
mm,
openly criticize our profession in some ways for.
mm,
Uh, I think it's arrogant for industrial design to think it's our sole responsibility to save the world through sustainability. I think that's uh, a very narrow view. I think it
mm,
takes collaboration of all the way to raw materials, supply chain, every different function. There's a lot of engineering involved in those types of feats. So we did a line of products called Reviva for Black and Decker. So it's
mm,
a waste plastic recycled housings for power tools, which was really really rewarding.
mm,
Reclaimed plastic. It's a product called uh, Easton Triton Renew. So but it behaves very differently when you injection mold.
mm,
It has lots of technical challenges, and but the cost is still quite high to use that material.
yeah.
So you're getting less of a product for a higher price, which is
Mm,
tough when it comes to really functional product. Whereas you have these super materials like I'll say Xenoi, I think that's even dated now, but from a
mm,
polymer standpoint, that you could design a product that may last in market for 30 years. I think that is a great approach. Doing basically designing well and not necessarily as trend based, but a little bit more
mm,
classic on the form base, something a little more timeless. I've personally been blessed that a lot of my products have lasted in market for a significant amount of time, and I inherited one category that I'm really proud of what came out of it in my last, one of my last things at Stanley Black and Decker was knives for DeWalt. So it was a
mm,
category where we had developed a number of utility knives in the past that had gone through full development, launched, and then been discontinued within a year or two's time. So all of that resource time, um, production is kind of wasted effort and energy, and
mm,
not the best use of natural resources to keep swinging and missing. I think there was like 7 or 8 that did not make it past
mm,
that line, and now that business is competing with TTI in Milwaukee, and really great, just phenomenal design work done by the team there too.
mm,
Charlie and Tim Payne, who are on my team, just crushed it. Charlie's expanded his career as a result of the work done there, and to me, I think the designs that were done for that are going to last in market for 20, 30 years. It's very likely. They're just really, really well executed. And to me, that's a really big sustainability win, that product longevity. You look back to even, I think my grandmother had a Sunbeam toaster that had like the automatic rise toast, and I'm pretty sure that thing still works.
mhm,
So it's outlived my grandparents. So that's true sustainable design in my thought versus the more trend based quick opportunity kind of thing. um, is hard, but sometimes it's just the design solution wasn't um, I'll say vetted, or wasn't as successful, and that is more costly from a sustainability standpoint in my opinion.
oh, huge. Yeah, there's not too many products you can point to that have been released over recent years that you know fit into the kind of that longevity category. Is there in terms, stuff that we would pass down to our kids and our grandkids?
Like a KitchenAid
Whereas,
mixer, that's
yeah,
a great example, right? I mean, it's way overbuilt, lasts forever,
yeah,
hangs down, versus something. we're kind of conditioned, I think, and especially in the States, to every year to every 3 years, we're buying a new toaster oven, toaster, coffee maker,
Yeah.
name it. And I'd much rather buy things that hopefully I never have to buy again is my goal. I'd rather not,
Yeah.
from a consumer standpoint. But
Absolutely, yeah. It's we do live in a throwaway culture, don't we? But also, you have that balance of, you mentioned earlier about kind of protecting design, and it's something that one of my previous guests, Jude Pullen, has commented on online recently about kind of the proficiency of, or the prolificacy, sorry, of the security screws and the exotic kind of security screws to make it harder to get access to products, and I suppose protect your design in a certain respect. But on the other side, you want it to be, last long and then be repairable if needs to be. Some of those, those appliances that you talk about, you could just take apart and replace some of the wiring if it worn down or whatever. But you don't get that so much these days with everything glued together.
it's true.
Yeah.
It's very true. Some of that, I think, is cost savings, through the development. Sometimes you have things that you don't want, an average consumer, like lithium batteries, you don't want them trying to serve things like that. So you need some kind of service infrastructure to actually handle that professionally and safely. And I think that's a challenge across the board. It would be fantastic to have something upgradable. We did concepts in the past of doing that, even with specific power tools of, you've got a frame and you're upgrading components, almost like a model RC car kind of method. But it's really hard to build a business case to sustain some of those because all of your math becomes very different. You're looking at things like, it would maybe make sense for an underwater drill or a piece of welding equipment or something on that goes on an oil rig, that really serious type of use case scenario. But when you can produce a hammer drill for $300 retail, it's really hard to make the argument for something that's probably going to cost you $5,000. It's a cost problem.
It's a difficult challenge. So, and one that we're probably don't have time to solve on today's podcast. Like, it is one of those topics that you could just talk and talk forever, and then another little angle comes in, and it's so complicated. But super interesting. Well, we're rapidly approaching the hour mark, Tylan. So we'll wrap it up very quickly. And I like to ask people at the end of the show, what they're most excited about kind of coming up in the next 12 months. So perhaps you could talk on that, and then we'll dive into kind of podcasts or book recommendations you might have. But yeah, what are you excited about for the next 12 months?
Obviously, I'm always excited about our next new product launches and entering new categories, new challenges. I'm also just very optimistic about all the design talent that's out there and the impact that designers can have on business. I believe it's been proven mathematically that design-led businesses actually earn more. I still mourn the loss of like Johnny Ive at Apple, and the CDO position there, I think, was a massive mistake. And I'd love to see these assertive design leaders come up, learn the business acumen, and become that horsepower that really drives business. I think that's something that I'm always excited about, and I believe design should take over the world there. So yeah, I'm just very excited for future product and the future of design. I've seen too much like doom and gloom online that the profession is dead and things like that, and I think that is a extremely negative and probably intentionally polarizing viewpoint. But it is very competitive, and it takes some serious effort, almost like professional athlete level commitment to really succeed in the profession. You have to be serious at it, and it is globally competitive, which I think many design competent parts of the world, I think the UK region has continued to be a leader in that space. I would say in the US, from an education standpoint, I think it's maybe rescinded a little bit by comparison of Asia and other parts of the world. And that's the reality. It's globally competitive. If you're in one of these massive markets, you come with an extreme advantage of understanding of the culture and the user, and you've got to get after it to take a leadership role.
Yeah. there's no place for complacency, is there? It's you gotta be competitive, and that's what would make, like you said, a good member of your team. It kind of applies globally, doesn't it? So no, that's awesome. Well, final point. Any books or podcasts that you're reading at the moment that you like to recommend?
It's a great question. It's not exactly design related, but we were talking about leadership, and I made a note to mention it. So my wife has her doctorate in education. She's in a different world altogether. It's a social worker by master's degree training. But Brene Brown talks about leading with vulnerability and empathy, and I think that's another thing that is really powerful. That I know I was enamored with it when I read it, and Nicole thankfully highlights these things to me to keep my brain growing. But I think it's something I know I did throughout my career on cross-functional teams, is leading with vulnerability. I was not the strongest form developer or designer in that sense. And when we needed something from either the engineering or the marketing team, whether it's investment in budget or if it's investment in effort or manufacturing process, just saying, hey, basically, like, I'm going to get beat up for this. Like, I really need, an edge or some help to get this where it needs to be from my leaders. It was really impactful. It helps. I think when people are all focused on like helping each other for a shared goal. That's why I'm a big fan of Scrum teams in development. I think that's really, really helpful. So if I was going to pick something, I would say, one of Brene Brown's books on leadership would be.
I love that. I think there's a lot to be said on kind of vulnerability and asking for help. Regardless whether you're leading or whether you're kind of looking for work or looking for suppliers, people generally, human nature is to want to be helpful. That's certainly what I found throughout my lifetime, my career. But a lot of people are shy about asking for help because they think it shows weakness. But actually, most people want to be helpful. They just don't know that you want help. So just ask. Good things will happen. So. What a lovely way to wrap up the podcast. So on a lovely note there. So Tylan, it's been amazing kind of spending the time with you. I'm looking forward to catch up at CES, but we'll speak in the meantime. But Tylan Tschopp, thank you so much for being on Why Design.
Likewise, Chris. No, it's been a pleasure. Very happy to do it. A great conversation. Thank you for making it so easy. It was great.
Thank you for having me. Thanks for listening to Why Design. If this episode gave you some new ideas, share it with someone in your team who'd find it useful. And follow the show so you don't miss what's next. And if you're building a product team or looking for your next challenge in design or engineering, that's exactly what we do at Kodu. We help companies hire smarter and faster and help great talent find work that actually fits. I'm Chris White. Connect with me on LinkedIn and let's keep raising the bar for design leadership. Until next time, stay curious, stay creative, and keep asking, why design?